How a bill becomes a law. Please try to fit these notes in your own words into the worksheet provided to you. I'm Just a Bill is a video that you should go to YouTube and watch. There's not going to be enough time on this video to watch it. Schoolhouse Rock. At the very end of this activity and at the end of class, we'll be critiquing this video for its accuracy. Of course, it's a kid's show, so it's not supposed to be as accurate as these set of notes, but that's what we'll be doing. So the very first step of bill becoming a law is introduction. This is the formal introduction. Only legislators can submit a bill. The president and everybody else can suggest a bill. They can call up their legislator and they can say, hey, this is a great idea, but only the legislators themselves can actually submit it. One of the only real restriction about which chamber that the bills start in is if it has to do with money at all, it's going to start in the House. Otherwise, they can begin in each chamber. The bicameral legislature has to, in this type of situation, has to pass a bill in each. The bill has to pass in each chamber before it can go to the president. Ideas can come from citizens, parties, interest groups. A lot of times are through lobbying or through actual bill writing themselves, introduce laws to legislators, and then they can determine whether or not that they're going to introduce them. So how are they formally introduced? Well, they're placed into a hopper in the House, which is just a box. And in the Senate, it's announced in the morning and given to the clerk. So that's what happens. So just like any other situation, you can't really, when there's thousands of bills proposed each year, which there are in the United States, you have to delegate them. You have to look at them and decide whether you're going to throw them away or continue them or edit them. So the system that Congress has come up with is a committee system. Leaders in the chamber send the bill to the appropriate committee. There's different types of committees. There's standing committees, which are permanent. There's 21 in the House, 16 in the Senate. Select, which are usually temporary for a specific purpose or a specific problem, are created. There's some joint committees where members of the House and in the Senate are both members of that. That has to do with like the library and printing, some sort of boring but more day-to-day and important things. The last one is the most temporary and the most dramatic, which is the conference committee. If there's a committee that, or if there's a bill that's been introduced and passed through each chamber that's similar, what happens is they'll create some conference committee where members of the House and members of the Senate will come together and create a compromise to send back to each House to pass. So if we look at the 21 committees in the House of Representatives, you'll notice that there's agriculture appropriations, which is money, budget, education, workforce. You can see that it covers just about every kind of topic that you can cover, which is the idea. The Rules Committee is especially important in the House because they can set up the rules, which means they can tell you how long you can debate. So of course, each committee has their own website, and some of them even have subcommittees, like the House on Agriculture does. They have Conservation, Energy and Forestry, Department of Operations, Oversight, Nutrition, all the way down to Livestock, Rural Development, and Credit. So these, each one of these committees deals specifically with this kind of these type of laws. So that way, the committee members actually become experts in that particular kind. 16 in the Senate. There's less people in the Senate, so they have less committees. And you can see some of them are just sort of bunched together. Okay, down in the bottom, you can see that joint committees on printing, joint committee on taxation, library, and economic committee were all in the House as well. That's because members from each chamber were there. So the committees basically, the committee chairman can look at a bill that's been proposed or passed on to him and throw it away or put it on the bottom of the pile. But if they do decide to go through with that bill, the first thing that they do is hearings. So in hearings, you'll have people, professionals or people with experience in that particular topic or having with the subject of that bill. The hearings will The hearings actually, what they do is they inform the congressman of the committee members of more information to help them make a decision for the next part, which is the markup period. This is where members work together, they make the bill better, or they kill it. Based on the hearings that they've heard and their opinions. So now the committee then votes, and they then either, if it's defeated, then the bill's dead, and if it passes, they actually come up with a report. This is just a presentation. This is a presentation to the rest of their chamber that says, hey, these are the good parts about it. You should vote for this. So you should have one section for House and one section for Senate, because the floor action, the debate, and the vote are different, and each bill has to go through these different actions or paths. So once the bill is passed to the committee, it goes back to the chamber. In the House, the Speaker and the Rules Committee, or the Speaker of the House or the Rules Committee can basically kill the bill, set up the rules, determine when it's going to be done. I mean, it's pretty hardcore control. In the Senate, the majority leader, which is the leadership of the majority party, controls the schedule with the input from the minority leader, and they say, okay, let's put it on the calendar here. Again, in the House, there's 435 members, and it's a major hierarchy of power. In the Senate, it's 100 members of relative equals. So once the debate rules are set, there's been a developed, over time, there's been a developed set of rules. The House has a time limit for each member set for each particular bill. This is important with 435 people. In the Senate, there is no time limit. The only way to limit time of debate is by cloture. I always think of cloture mouth. It takes 60 votes to tell people to sort of be quiet and to take the vote. Sometimes people use this no time limit as to their advantage. Let's say there's 45 of the 100 senators that do not want a particular bill to be passed. What they can do is threaten or carry out a filibuster. A filibuster is talking the bill to death. They can talk and talk and talk, add amendments, read the Bible, do whatever that they want until everybody else, the other 55 members, just sort of give up. Now, of course, that wasn't used too often. Cloture wasn't invoked very often until the last 15 or 20 years or so. Now this is a major sticking point in the Senate. In fact, it's become a pretty controversial topic with current efforts actually to change the filibuster rules or the cloture rule, because now it almost takes 60 votes to pass anything through the Senate. In order to actually take a vote, you have to have quorum, which just means the majority. You have to have enough people there to vote. 218 members need to be present in the House, that's half, or just over half, and 51 in the Senate. And just in case anyone wasn't completely positive, when the votes are taken for that particular bill, majority wins. Sometimes congressmen and women don't vote just by what they agree on, they actually have to compromise. Now this is part of politics, it's always happened, there's give and take no matter what happens. But here's a few ways that Congress people can leverage each other. First is earmarks. This is parts of the bill that include where the money will be spent. Now, on a typical bill, what happens is the Senate and the House, they pass bills, and they determine how much money that bill gets, that particular law gets. And then the executive branch decides how to actually execute that bill, execute or spend the money. So Congress has used earmarks to control where that money goes instead of allowing the executive branch to do with it whatever they want. Sometimes there's a little bit more shady parts, and people get pork barrel spending, which is earmarks that go directly to their constituents, to their district, where their home is. And they do this specifically so they can help out their home, help out their voters, get reelected, and sort of leverage the people who want that particular bill passed. Other times there's things called riders, and it is just what it sounds like. Another idea or another part of the bill that jumps on the bill as people vote for it. Oftentimes they have nothing to do with the subject. These are nicknamed Christmas tree bills. Think of ornaments where the very top is the original idea, and as it adds, it gets fatter and fatter and fatter. Okay, in the House of Representatives, the attachments or amendments have to be germane, but in the Senate, you can get riders that have nothing to do with it. Maybe you're having a bill about gun control and you add to it, if everybody wants to, you can add a defunding Planned Parenthood, for example, onto that gun control bill. And the idea is if you did that, more people may vote for that particular bill. Also, log rolling is basically trading votes. They agree to support each other's votes so they can just get their vote, their bill passed. This is sort of shady, often done in secret, and it's discouraged, but frankly, I'm not sure that it will ever be stopped. So once it goes to the other chamber, then the other chamber votes for it, unless, of course, the other chamber is working on a similar bill. If that's the case, then what they do is they have a conference committee that irons out the details, final bill, and then it goes, that final bill is passed back to the House or the Senate again. Most of the time that's passed. Differences in the chambers then, the general statements that you should write are basically the House passes a lot more bills, a lot more radical types of bills. In fact, the House sometimes passes bills just to pass bills and to make political statements, knowing full well that the Senate won't pass those particular bills, and what they're doing has no chance of becoming law. But they do this because they're elected every 2 years, and by their essence, by their makeup, they are more radical. The Senate is more slow-moving because of their rules, like the filibuster and the advantages that people take, like filibusters, and oftentimes they're less radical. Finally, the president takes his own action to the bill. If it's passed on to him, he can sign the bill into law. Usually use lots of different pens and copies, so there's a lot of different mementos from each one. Or he could veto a law, which is basically saying no way, and send it back to the original chamber with a little note describing why. That's off. It's published, so we could all read that if it happens. Now what happens, each chamber has the opportunity to sort of override that veto. But it takes 2/3 of the vote in each chamber, and that's really hard to do. So oftentimes when a president vetoes a bill, it's pretty much dead. Another twist on this is if the president takes no action, it becomes a bill, or it becomes a law after 10 days. Oftentimes presidents will do this because they know their veto will get overridden, and they don't want to spend the political capital it takes to veto and get defeated by that. And also, sometimes they just don't want to assign their name to that particular bill. A trick is the pocket veto. The president does nothing, but if the Congress passes a bill, let's say 10 days left in the session, or 9 days left in the session, the president doesn't have to do anything, and the Congress has to start all over again. If that happens, then the bill becomes a law. So, our review question is going to be, how could this video be changed to become more accurate for a high school audience?